Caesar snack sandwich. Today I have a quick video for you on this fluid. Now, fluid is a new innovative idea coming out from InstaDapp here. Now, InstaDapp, if you don't know what they're doing, they've been in DeFi for quite a long time, building on top of other protocols, making things easier for people to use, like with flash loans and account management and stuff like that. But anyways, this is a pretty cool idea. There's not a whole lot to read. I will link to this article. This is basically what I read. I read this, I thought about it quite a bit, and I think I've got a pretty good understanding, and I'm going to explain it to you with a flowchart. It's not going to take that long, but there's a lot of cool ideas in here. And as always, I suggest you to come and read this and kind of follow along with this as it comes out and more information comes out of the ether, and they explain things a little more clearly. Maybe they have a more fuller docs on this idea. Now it's pretty cool. Okay, so I'm going to swing over to the flowchart and explain to you how I understand this based on reading this thing here. Okay. Okay, so here we have the two brothers. We have Dollar Bill and we have Boosted Bill. Dollar Bill's got some USDC and Boosted Bill right now has some ETH. Okay, so they're both going to play a lot of roles in this thing. So I'm going to kind of use them both at the same time and kind of talk about how this thing works. Okay, so the very first thing that this fluid introduces is what they're calling the liquidity layer. Okay, and the first feature of this liquidity layer is that it's a giant contract filled with all of the liquidity. All of the tokens are inside here. I consider it kind of like the balancer vault. Like all the tokens inside there, they're all piled into one smart contract, okay? And the security feature is that this smart contract has an outflow limit and withdraw on withdrawals and borrows. So if anyone deposits into this liquidity layer, they can only withdraw so much without triggering that. So like, let's say the liquidity, the withdrawal limit is uh, like it can only, let's say there's 100 million inside, 100 million USDC inside there, and the withdrawal limit is 80 million. So someone who has 10 million can get all of their money out, right? But they can only, at one point, there can only be 20 million withdrawn. And it's to kind of limit things and to stop that thing from getting emptied, right? And that goes for both withdrawing from the liquidity layer, so taking your assets back, or actually borrowing out of that liquidity layer. Okay, so that's the first two, the security feature of this liquidity layer. Now, what is the purpose of this liquidity layer? Is all of the other dApps that this thing's talking about are going to be built on top of this liquidity layer, and it has a lot of cool features because of that. Okay, so the first thing is a money market. So think Aave, Compound, Iron Bank, any of these kinds of places where you supply assets and you borrow a different asset. Okay, so Dollar Bill, he's not degen, he's pretty safe. So he's going to take his USDC, he's going to put it into this money market, he's going to lend it, and that will be sent directly into the liquidity layer and pile up with all the tokens inside the liquidity layer. Okay, and then just like any other normal money market, Boosted Bill will come along with some collateral. So in this case, he's going to use ETH. It's going to deposit into the collateral, and then that will go into the liquidity layer. And then he will borrow out Dollar Bill's USDC or whatever USDC happens to be in there via this money market. Now that's standard, that's normal, okay? But what makes this very special is, let's say this money market comes up with a version 2 to kind of make the borrowing experience better for Boosted Bill, and they deploy this, then Boosted Bill will have to migrate his position, right? He will have to resupply his collateral and re-borrow his assets. But Dollar Bill's USDC is put back into the liquidity layer and then is able to be used in the next iteration of this money market. So any new iterations on the money market, the people who are the passive or the liquidity providers very likely don't need to migrate their positions. Okay. Moving on, let's say there's the CDP, so think MakerDAO or Abracadabra or some sort of stable coin where you use some collateral to mint a stable coin. This also works on top of this liquidity layer. So In this case, I'm just going to use ETH as the collateral. So he supplies ETH. That ETH is sent into the liquidity layer, and that CDP mints them some stablecoin. Now they don't talk about what that stablecoin is going to be, what it's going to be called, or anything like that. But so think like liquid dollar or something like this. Okay, so he borrows that. Okay, now they boast that this thing's going to have a 95% like loan to value, so you'll be able to borrow 95% of your value that you've put in there. So that's the first like both. They don't explain how this exactly is achieved, but you know it's getting pretty close to that now with like a lot of the CDPs that are out there, like liquidity and stuff like that. Now, the thing that they talk a lot about and that they spent a lot of time talking about is the liquidation system inside this CDP is quite different, okay, than what it is in other places. It's only what is needed simultaneous liquidations. So what that means is they'll only liquidate what has to be liquidated in order to get his loan to value ratio back so that he's not at the liquidation threshold anymore, and it'll just kind of do little by little. So think like Uniswap ticks or little. It's not like half of his assets taken away or all of it or even 75%. It's just take what needs to be taken to liquidate it. And the other thing is it's everyone's liquidations happen in a single transaction, can happen in a single transaction. Okay, so it kind of like allows for a more gas efficient liquidation process, and that because it, and that other the other feature of that only what is needed, it stops like huge cascading. It doesn't stop, but it reduces the chances of cascading liquidations, because if a whole bunch of like ETH is taken out because it's just a tiny bit below liquidation, then if it just liquidates massive amounts of ETH, like 50%, 50%, 50%, all these suppliers, then that sends the price of ETH down even farther, and we get more liquidations, more liquidations. But if it's only what is needed, then it might not cause cascading liquidations so much, right? So now, the other key feature of this is that these only what is needed liquidations are actually swaps. Okay, so the like in this case it's a swap for this stablecoin for that that ETH, right? That collateral of ETH. So any kind of DEX aggregator can come along and make that swap. And now because the incentive to make that swap is 0.1. So in other CDPs and other liquidation mechanics, the incentive to liquidate someone can be quite high, right? Because they have to pay them quite a bit to liquidate them. But if it's just a swap, then they don't need to incentivize a swap as much. It just has to be a little bit better than what it is on the other market maker or other the dexes and so forth. Okay, so all of these dex aggregators can kind of just swap these assets for this through this CDP. Okay, and liquidate those people. Now the next thing they talk about is this dex built on top of the liquidity layer. This DEX is pretty interesting. Okay, so it's not really a DEX like what you would consider like Uniswap, or it's very different than how you would supply liquidity to like Uniswap or any kind of AMM that's currently out there. So Boots the Bill is going to take part in this, and what he's going to do is he's going to take some sort of form of collateral. So in this case, it's going to be ETH. He's going to send it into the DEX, and then that'll go into the liquidity layer. And then again, that ETH is in there for someone else to borrow, right, through the money market or something like this, right? So that ETH will go into there, right, and sit inside the liquidity layer, and then it will allocate some of the other assets that are in there. So maybe he decides, oh, I want to use ETH and I want to quote unquote borrow some USDC and USDT as a liquidity pool, and then the DEXs can swap through that pool, right? So it's kind of like he's putting his asset as collateral, And then that collateral's value is being used to kind of allow some funds inside this liquidity layer to build a liquidity pool for swapping. Okay. Now, why would you want to do that? Because there's swapping fees. The trading fees will reduce the debt. Okay. Now, of course, there is interest on this, right? So he's got to pay interest on it. But if the interest is kept low because all of this liquidity layer, all of these other protocols built on top are putting lots of USDC and lots of USDT in there, then he can kind of, hey, I want to put some collateral in there as well and kind of put some of those underutilized assets as a liquidity pool for people to swap, right? And then those trading fees will then reduce his debt as people paying trading fees. His debt is going down in that sense. Okay, so that's pretty much all I understand from reading that article. Like I said, it's not a complete in-depth article on how everything works, but I do really like this idea. I really like this liquidity layer in the middle there and how it kind of just allows protocols to build on the liquidity is there, and it makes it for much more efficient. Like if you look at the TVL in Compound versus the TVL in Aave, in this model, if this model was the standard from those days, then those TVLs would be combined in the liquidity layer as a total TVL of like DeFi. Okay, so that's that's all. Like I said, that's all I know. If you want to know more, go to their Discord, go read that docs, go ask some more questions, and watch this and find out if this is something you're interested in following along and learning more. Now, again, this is not live. This is all in kind of beta or some sort of pre-launch phase. Okay, so anyways, so that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching and goodbye.